Do you feel like you need to be in control of everything? Your plans, your emotions, your reactions, your future, what others think of you? Do you live with that subtle, or sometimes explicit, tension that if you let your guard down for a second, everything will fall apart? Perhaps you don't even realize how trapped you are in this mode of functioning. But the truth is, if you are tired, frustrated, anxious, if you feel like you live in a constant state of alert, it's likely that you are living under the tyranny of control. But here's a brutal truth. The more you try to control, the more controlled you become. This is not just a catchy phrase. It's a psychological trap, one that Alan Watts exposed with disconcerting clarity. He realized something that few have dared to face. Our obsession with control is, in fact, a symptom of deep fear. Fear of unpredictability, fear of pain, fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of not being enough. And the problem is that this fear leads us to fight against the very nature of life, a nature that is, by definition, fluid, unpredictable, and wild. Society has taught you to behave as if you were the absolute commander of your existence. Take the reins of your life. You are responsible for your destiny. Don't depend on anyone. Phrases like these have become modern mantras. But Watts questions, what if this relentless pursuit of control is not strength, but a disguised form of desperation? Think about your life for a moment. In the times when you tried the hardest to control everything, the relationship, the work, the emotions, even the timing of things, how many times did that actually work? And how many times did you find yourself sinking even deeper, feeling defeated, suffocated, paralyzed? The truth is that this impulse for control creates a constant tension. You are at war with reality. And reality, my friend, does not obey commands. This is exactly where Watts's wisdom comes in. Inspired by Taoism, he presents us with a radical alternative. Wu Wei, the art of acting without forcing. It's not passivity, it's intelligence. It's learning to move with the current, not against it. It's recognizing that water does not break the stone by force, but by constancy and fluidity. It's realizing that the stiffest tree breaks in the storm, while the bamboo that bends survives. This video is a mirror. It will show you, with the necessary brutality, how much you are trying to control the uncontrollable, and how much that is controlling you. But it will also give you a key to escape this invisible prison that you have built yourself. A key to, perhaps for the first time, breathe deeply without the constant pressure of having to predict, anticipate, dominate everything. Are you ready to face this? Because from here on, nothing you've heard about strength, success, and self-control will seem enough. And the first step to liberation is to stop fighting against life itself. From a very early age, you were conditioned to believe that there is a you separate from the world, that there is an isolated I closed within a capsule called the body, observing reality from the outside as if controlling a game with an invisible joystick. This idea that we are autonomous, solitary entities commanding life as if it were a machine is the foundation of almost everything you have learned about identity, responsibility, merit, success, and failure. But what if this idea is a lie? A sophisticated lie, repeated so many times that it has become common sense, and now governs your mind. Alan Watts, in his bold reading of Eastern philosophy, especially Taoism, shatters this illusion with a phrase as simple as it is disturbing. You did not come into the world, you came out of it, like a leaf comes from a tree. In other words, you are not separate from life. You are life itself, temporarily expressing through a body, a personality, a name. But Western culture insists on the contrary. It says you are a separate agent who needs to conquer the world, shape destiny, and submit reality to your will. This narrative has created a psychology of control. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. If you are not where you would like to be, it's because you didn't try hard enough. If you are suffering, the solution is to work harder, plan better, control everything more precisely. This way of thinking has turned you into a little dictator trying to govern an empire called life. And like every dictator, you live in constant tension, surrounded by invisible enemies, anxious about every detail, suffocated by the need to always be right, always in control. You look at your emotions as if they were undisciplined troops, at your relationships as negotiation arenas, at the future as a war to be won. But this is exhausting, isn't it? And worse, it's futile. You do not control the beating of your heart. You do not control your digestion. You do not control your deepest thoughts. They arise, sometimes intrusively, unpredictably. So why do you believe you can control life as a whole? This illusion, that we are absolute commanders of our own existence, is the root of modern suffering. And the more you believe in it, the further you drift from what you truly are. An expression of the whole, a wave of the ocean, a thread in the tapestry of the cosmos. You are not separate from the world. You are the world itself, experiencing itself for a brief moment. But to see this clearly, you need to dismantle the armor that society has dressed you in. You need to question the myth of the isolated and autonomous self. You need to understand that the control you seek is, in fact, a reflection of your illusory separation. And it is here that Alan Watts gives us the key that unlocks the first lock. The controlling ego is a fiction, but if control is not the way, then what is? How can we live, act, and relate without falling into the trap of rigid control? How can we be free without falling into passivity? In the next part, we will dive into the Taoist concept that Alan Watts considered the most elegant answer to this dilemma: Wu Wei. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You have been taught to fight, to conquer, to win. Since childhood, society pushes you into a race that never ends. Wake up early, be productive, achieve your goals, control your emotions, master the environment, shape the future. Don't stop, don't weaken, don't err. This is the modern manual for a successful life. And the result? Chronic anxiety, emotional fatigue, and a constant feeling of always being behind, always falling short, always pressured. But Alan Watts proposes something radically opposite. What if true power lies not in effort, but in its absence? Here comes the concept of Wu Wei, one of the central principles of Taoism. Simplistically translated as effortless action or non-action, Wu Wei does not mean inertia or apathy. On the contrary, it is a way of acting that does not conflict with the natural flow of things. It is the art of moving with life, not against it. It is action that does not stem from anxiety, but from harmony. Decision that does not arise from rigidity, but from wisdom. Watts understood that Wu Wei is not a passive choice, but an active posture of trust in the natural rhythm of the universe. It is when you stop fighting against the current and start swimming with it. You still move, still choose, still influence. But the action now comes from a deeper place, from listening, from observation, from integration with what is alive around you and within you. Think of water. It does not resist. It flows around. It does not confront obstacles with brutality, but envelops them, dissolves them over time, with patience, with silent persistence. Water is flexible, yet it moves mountains. It is gentle, yet it carves rocks. Wu Wei is to be like water, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Now reflect. How many times have you forced yourself to act when everything in you screamed that it was not the time? How many times did you try to control someone only to see that person drift further away? How many times did you suppress emotions because you believed you shouldn't feel that? These are examples of the opposite of Wu Wei, attempts to impose the ego's will on the flow of life. And these attempts always come at a price. Living, according to Wu Wei, is to begin listening, observing the rhythm of events, noticing when to act and when to wait, when to intervene and when to let go. It is an art, not a formula. And like all art, it requires sensitivity. It requires detachment from the ego that wants to always be in control. But beware, Wu Wei is not irresponsibility. It is not crossing your arms and waiting for everything to resolve itself. It is an internal attitude. You can be working hard, making important decisions, dealing with challenging situations, but all of this can be done in a state of Wu Wei if your action is in tune with the flow of the moment, and not as a desperate attempt to force reality to be what it is not. It is at this point that true freedom begins, when you act with life, not against it, when you stop reacting out of fear and start responding with clarity, when your actions become expressions of wisdom, not control. But the question that arises is inevitable. If Wu Wei is the way, why do we have such difficulty living it? Why is it so hard to let go of control, to trust, to flow? The answer lies in the most insidious addiction of the modern mind, a cycle of tension, fear, and frustration that feeds the illusion that, without control, everything falls apart. In the next part, we will delve deep into this cycle. Have you ever noticed how the attempt to control everything makes you more anxious? Have you noticed that the more you try to keep life in order, the more it seems to slip away? There is a hidden mechanism operating here, a subtle and cruel cycle that traps you in a psychological trap. The more you try to control reality, the more it frustrates you. And the more frustrated you feel, the more you try to control. This is the root of modern anxiety. It is not the world that suffocates you. It is your attempt to dominate it. The problem begins with a deeply rooted illusion, the belief that if you do everything right, if you are efficient, organized, rational, disciplined, life will reward you with security, predictability, and success. You want to control the outcome of your work, the behavior of the people around you, the direction of your relationships, even the flow of your own thoughts and emotions. But life doesn't work that way, and the more you try to force it to obey, the more it reacts, not with order, but with chaos. Alan Watts warned, "Living by trying to control everything is like trying to hold water in your hands. You close your fist, harden your fingers, and what happens? The water slips away. It cannot be possessed, only accompanied, but you insist. You blame yourself for not being able to. You feel guilty for being tired, and you start to think that the problem is with you, that you need to try harder, that you are still not doing it the right way, and then the cycle starts again. This is the fuel of anxiety, the constant feeling that there is something to be adjusted, corrected, kept under surveillance. Your mind doesn't stop. You anticipate problems that haven't happened yet. You mentally replay conversations. You imagine catastrophic outcomes. And all of this with the sole purpose of being prepared. But this preparation is an addiction disguised as responsibility. And do you know what the consequence of all this is? A deep frustration. Because despite all the effort, the results continue to slip out of your control. People remain unpredictable. The world continues to be chaotic, and you start to feel like you are failing. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are trying to do the impossible. Watts understood that this constant frustration is not an individual flaw. It is the symptom of an entire culture based on the idea that control equals security, and that letting go of control is dangerous. But he flips this thought. It is precisely this attempt to control everything that makes you more vulnerable, because you become rigid, inflexible, unable to deal with the unexpected. And when life breaks your expectations, as it always does, you break along with it. But what if there were another way to deal with reality? What if the answer lies not in controlling more, but in learning to be like water, flexible, adaptable, resilient? This is the lesson that Taoism offers, and that Alan Watts brought so clearly to the Western world. In the next part, we will dive into this transformative metaphor, the wisdom of water. We will understand why it is the ultimate symbol of strength that does not resist, but transforms everything. There is a force that does not need to shout, a silent, invisible force that shapes mountains, carves stones, transcends time, and navigates around everything that tries to block it. This force is water. And for Taoism, and for Alan Watts, it is the supreme metaphor for true wisdom. Water does not resist, it adapts. It does not fight against obstacles. It envelops them, dissolves them with patience, without haste, without tension. It does not impose its form on the world, but flows with the shapes that the world presents. It does not compete for territory. It finds gaps, infiltrates, penetrates, dissolves. In the end, it is the one that wins. Always. Alan Watts saw in water the essence of Tao philosophy, a model of life based on flexibility rather than rigidity, on surrender rather than domination, on listening rather than imposing. He clearly saw that what is hard, rigid, closed in on itself, like control, may seem strong at first, but is the first to break when the storm comes. Meanwhile, what is flexible, adaptable, open, like water, may seem fragile, but it is what survives, what remains. Now look at your own life. In what areas are you being like a rock, trying to resist the natural flow of things? Where are you struggling to control, hold on to, maintain everything under your dominion, even knowing that this is only hurting you? Perhaps in your relationships, where you try to change the other instead of understanding. Perhaps at work, where you force yourself to produce even when your body asks for rest. Perhaps in your emotions, where you try to force happiness and suffocate sadness as if feeling were a problem. But water teaches us something else. To feel is to flow. To live is to flow. And flowing does not mean giving up. It means finding the path of least resistance without abandoning direction. It means responding to life with intelligence, not rigidity. It means ceasing to be a wall and becoming a river. Watts said that when you observe nature, you realize it does not need to explain itself. Bamboo bends in the wind and then returns to its shape. It does not break. And that is precisely why it is strong. The river does not force its way. It finds, it waits, it navigates around, and it gets there. But this goes against everything we have been taught, doesn't it? The culture of effort, constant overcoming, the winner mentality that confuses rigidity with strength and vulnerability with weakness. Yet this culture is making you sick. It is disconnecting you from the natural rhythm of life. And the more you harden to withstand pressure, the more fragile you become. So, the question that arises now is, how to apply this wisdom in practice? How to live like water in a world that rewards rigidity? How to be flexible without losing direction? How to let go of control without losing a sense of responsibility? In the next part, we will explore how to apply the principles of Wu Wei and the wisdom of water in everyday life. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. The philosophy of Alan Watts is not an invitation to escape reality. It is a call to face it differently, more lucid, more aligned, more human. And perhaps now you are wondering, okay, all of this makes sense, but how do I apply this in my real life? In a world full of deadlines, obligations, pressures, and unpredictable people, how do I live in Wu Wei? How do I act like water without being swallowed by chaos? The answer begins with a fundamental principle. Don't try to apply everything at once. Start where you are. Wisdom is not in great revolutions, but in small course corrections. Those that, accumulated, bring you back to center. Let's start with something concrete. Your relationships. How many times have you tried to change someone? Insisted that the person see what you see, understand how you understand, feel how you feel. How many conversations turned into power struggles, not out of malice, but out of fear of losing control? Wu Wei teaches us to step out of that battlefield, stop trying to shape the other, and focus on what you can truly influence: your listening, your posture, your presence. Instead of reacting automatically, you observe. Instead of pushing, you embrace. And it is precisely there that something magical happens. The other changes. Because you change the space where the relationship occurs. At work, the logic is the same. Western culture loves to glorify productivity at any cost. But Watts would say, if you constantly need to force yourself, perhaps you are going against your natural flow. Wu Wei is not about abandoning responsibilities. It is about finding the balance between action and alignment. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you begin to cultivate rhythm. Instead of seeking efficiency at any price, you seek coherence with your internal state. Curiously, results often improve, because they now come from a more genuine place. And on the more intimate level, the emotional one, the application of Wu Wei may be the most powerful of all. How many times have you tried to control your emotions as if they were internal enemies? You feel anger and try to hide it. You feel fear and try to suppress it. You feel sadness and try to suffocate it with distractions. But emotional repression is the most toxic form of control, because what you deny grows. What you avoid controls you. Wu Wei invites us to observe emotions as waves. They arise, grow, break, and pass. No emotion is eternal, but every emotion that is resisted becomes a prison. Instead of repressing, feel. Instead of judging, listen. Instead of fighting against what you feel, ask, what does this want to show me? This simple change of posture transforms pain into wisdom, discomfort into clarity. This way of living, more fluid, more conscious, more connected to the real rhythm of life, does not mean abdicating action. It means acting with presence, not desperation. It means you still move, decide, dream, build. But you do it like water, adapting without losing yourself, shaping the world without breaking. Now that you understand how these principles can transform your concrete life, there is one final piece missing. Up to this point, we have talked about Wu Wei, the illusion of control, the wisdom of water, anxiety, and frustration. But there is an invisible thread that stitches all of this together: our relationship with existence itself. In the final part, we will get to the heart of Alan Watts's message. Control is an illusion. We have reached the most uncomfortable and perhaps the most liberating point of this entire journey. The control you seek so desperately does not protect you, it imprisons you. Everything you try to obsessively dominate, the future, emotions, others, outcomes, is in fact keeping you captive. Because deep down, absolute control is not security. It is fear disguised as responsibility. Alan Watts showed us that while you believe you are in command, you are deeply disconnected from the essence of life. You are trying to guide something that cannot be guided. You are demanding certainties from a universe that moves in constant transformation. You are trying to freeze a river. But life is not a project to be executed. It is a flow to be felt, a mystery to be lived, a movement to be followed. And when you try to reduce it to a plan, a schedule, a straight line, you lose what is most valuable about it: spontaneity, the beauty of the unexpected, the dance between chaos and harmony that makes everything pulse. The freedom you seek so much is not in control. It is in surrender. It is not blind, passive, resigned surrender, but a lucid surrender, conscious, a daily choice to no longer react with fear, but to respond with presence, to no longer try to dominate the uncontrollable, but to participate in it with intelligence, with sensitivity, with trust. And perhaps now you realize the problem was never your inability to control. The problem was believing that control was necessary. What said that the separate self, this ego that tries to impose itself on life, is an illusion? You are not a commander observing the world from the outside. You are the world itself, experiencing yourself. And from the moment you recognize this, everything changes. You stop fighting, and you start to flow. You stop hardening, and you start to adapt. You stop demanding, and you start to understand. And at that exact point, something new is born. A peace that does not depend on circumstances. A freedom that does not require control. A strength that does not need to win, because it is already in harmony with everything. Now I want to ask you, in which area of your life do you feel you are trying to control everything the most? Leave it in the comments, write, share. And if this video made sense to you, don't stop here. The next video is important. It continues this journey, and if you are truly ready to be free, you need to see what comes next. I'll see you there.